Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. This is DGI-402. We have some breaking news about India's budget, and I'll share that at the end of this episode. But first, let us take a look at other things, and I would please request you all to click on the like button for this video. And let's welcome my co-host Sridhar Chityalaji. Sridharji, namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Namaskar and good morning or good evening to good morning in the United States and good evening to everybody in India on this budget day.
So, viewers, we want to actually first go through the other numbers that are coming through, especially the global GDP number, so that we can provide you a contrast as to what is happening in India. This will be India looking outward. And I have some new information, Sridharji. I don't know if you have read this or not, but I'll share that for our viewers' sake. So stay tuned till the very end. Sridharji, take it away. Let us take a look at the global GDP projections. There is an expected slowdown from 3.4 to 2.9% globally, sir. What about the developed economies? Take it away, sir.
So the developed economies are going to be the what you call the derailers. The advanced economies, which probably grew very modest 1.7% in 2022, will shrink to about 1 to 1.2% in 2023. The fact that it is 1 to 1.2% itself is quite remarkable, because when we started or when we were halfway through the year, we were thinking of even 0% and negative growth for United States and the other, most notably Japan and the European economies, to be just hovering around the 0%. So the 1% number is still, relatively better, but the overall contraction around the world will have a cascading effect on the growth factors for 2023, sir.
Sridharji, I have been here reading up on possible supply chain issues. One of the things that I've heard is that India is in somewhat of a bright spot, because India's requirement of phosphates, which is required for its fertilizers, is guaranteed to come from Russia. There is no breakage in that. Now, the supply chain issues are going to hurt, for example, things coming from China to West Europe as well as to United States. How much you think is there a tilt by US towards India to try and get this process forward, where some of the industries can come from China to India? There could be an environment being created by the Indian government in its new budget that will help. Please take it away, sir.
So I think that the whole the re-augmentation of the supply chain has been the focus. In fact, the Europeans call it as China plus one. So being that, you're not going to throw China into the kitchen sink, but you will also simultaneously develop an adjacent model. And India and Vietnam are very much in the ecosystem in terms of that strategy. The fact, I think we discussed it in the last DGI, that there is a serious discussion that is going on between the two national security advisors, especially around defense and some of the emerging technologies. So you will begin to see much more active participation by US in conjunction with Western Europe, as well as some of the Asian countries. For example, allocation of capital by Japan, allocation of capital by Korea. Already you are beginning to see with a shift towards India being one of the anchor tenants.
And viewers, like I said, there's a lot of information that I have to share with you on the Indian budget on top of what Sridharji is going to be sharing. So please stay tuned till the very end and do like this video. I mean, why I'm saying all this is we really need to pump up the viewership. We are doing good, but we could be doing very much better. Sridharji, the next topic I want to talk to you about specific US markets. There's been talk about recession, but yet the US markets, the numbers that are coming through, I mean, it's not as bad as it's being made out to be. That's how I see it, sir. Although there have been layoffs in the tech sector and so on and so forth, I see now the Dow slowly again coming back up. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I think that the Dow is reacting more to some of the income and economic shifts taking place from what used to be called the digital economy to a much more transformative economy in the core sectors, especially energy is one, industrials is another, materials is another. So you're beginning to see some shifts taking place And in fact, JP Morgan went and made a very bold statement that the economic paradigm has shifted. So what you're seeing is some positive momentum. For example, airlines is seeing uptick in the traffic. So you're beginning to see some of the shifts, and that is feeding itself into the positive momentum, both in the Dow as well as in the S&P and some of the other types of technologies. That's why you are seeing spurt as well as in the NASDAQ sector. But this may be, Sriji, the fourth quarter, and maybe even to some extent you may see the first quarter. But when the interest rates cross 5% mark, when the consumer balance sheets begin to shrink, as is happening, you will still see some pain in the mid quarters of 2023. And so this is the reason why economists are very cautious in terms of a mild recession rather than a hard crash landing.
Thank you, sir. And now let's take a quick look at what is happening in Myanmar. 2 years now that it has overthrown the elected regime of Aung San Suu Kyi, and now while Myanmar is more or less weathering the sanctions that the West has imposed on them, there are some murmurs that India is still engaging with the junta there. But there are a few countries that are propping it up. Sridharji, which are the countries that are propping up Myanmar? What does it mean for India from a national security perspective?
Well, I think that it's very interesting that Myanmar continues to be of very strategic importance because of the Mizo and rebels and other kinds of issues. India has maintained, especially with the junta, the very strategic engagement and dialogue, which has served its border interests quite well. Now, who is propping up, Myanmar? Obviously, the usual people who are the opposite to the West, which is Russia and China, have propped up. So, if you happen to be part of the India, China, Russia triangle, then from a national security point of view, I think that India seems to be managing the situation well. Myanmar economy is in shambles, but it is in the hands of the army, and it is also there's no democracy. They're trying to impose a democracy which United Nations has very strongly condemned. Again, this is two wars are going on, or two issues are going on. This is the second anniversary today of the Myanmar coup. Okay, economy is in shambles, propped up by Russia, and they put more sanctions. More sanctions don't work. We have seen that. We are almost on the first year anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war. It is heading the same way as far as Ukraine is concerned as it relates to Myanmar. So both are failed, defunct policies without a proper win-win type of a dialogue. That very much needs to happen, Sriji.
Thank you, sir. And now let's take a look at what is happening in Russia. Now, there is a big conflagration, I should say, or a war going on in the Donetsk region, where the Ukraine is trying to recapture these two regions, which have been sort of like up and down. Because if you remember, Sridharji, the whole thing started in January 2022 with the two governors of the two Lugansk and Donetsk region going to Russia, sitting with Putin and declaring independence of some sort, right? Now, this is what the Ukrainian army appears to be trying to get back. And there is fierce fighting going on right now. I don't know whether the tanks have arrived yet from the Western Europe as well as from the United States. And it looks like Ukraine is taking a pounding at this point of time. What is your take on the situation, sir? And now, even as all this is happening, I'm hearing that the United States is going to give a $2 billion aid package to Ukraine. I mean, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel, sir?
No, I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. We have talked about this. And for first and foremost, your question, which is namely, have all the equipment arrived? No, they are arriving. It's not the question of arriving. They also need to be trained on some of these various types of tanks that are coming from Germany, France, and United States. They are also being trained in Poland. They have shrunk the training from X number of days to 5 days, so these guys can go and fight. As far as the Donetsk region is concerned, I think I have a feeling that the game is done. The Russians probably have now regained upper control with significant damages inflicted on the Ukrainians. So I think what you're going to see, Sriji, is by the end, this is when I think Zelensky will come to the table and some sanity will prevail on the Western minds. I think the Donetsk and Luhansk regions are gone, just as the Crimea is gone as far as the Ukraine is concerned. They have to deal with the residual part. Maybe they will get some parts of Kherson region, but otherwise, the eastern part is over, Sriji.
Quickly, I want to kind of look at what is going to happen. Again, I'm just going to take on from where you said, sir. So let us say there's a reduced Ukraine, and let us say Ukraine applies for NATO membership so that the NATO missiles can be launched to prevent any further incursions into its territory. Now, the problem with this is that every NATO member must approve the membership of Ukraine in order to be admitted. Now we are seeing that Sweden, just because this is Sweden is a democracy. There's an extreme right-wing politician who has burnt Quran, and now Turkey is again digging in and saying we will not give you the approval. Sridharji, do you think Ukraine stands a chance, or will somebody else say no, 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 you can't join in?
I think what will happen is Ukraine will somehow make its way into EU before it makes its way into NATO, right? They will become part of some kind of a EU as part of the some budgetary resolution that would happen with regard to all of the countries. So there will be concessions that may happen. As far as NATO membership is concerned, I very much doubt there would be a NATO member unless West and unless Western Europe and NATO and United States, because NATO is beyond Western Europe, are prepared to fight. Right now, only Eastern Europeans, notably Lithuanians, Latvians, Polish, they are the people who are saying we are under deep threat. Even Finland is coming to the party as far as the protection of the land. But on the other side, you have Hungary as well as
leaning towards Russia, Belarus,
leaning towards Russia, which makes it a very, very complex. So my view is that unless the West sits down with Russia and Zelensky and bring them to senses and tell Zelensky, okay, we'll come to some kind of an agreement where you're not going to demand Crimea is part of your Croatian president says that Crimea will no longer get back to so they forget it. It's not going to happen. So you're going to see a lot of, you got to have a negotiation which allows Ukraine to retain without posing a significant threat, or at least perceived threat, as Russia believes in it or Russia thinks. So therefore, I don't see that happening, and you're going to see more and more good money being a major world economic contraction being shrunk into waste, Sriji.
Sridharji, I'm going to read this thing so I don't make any mistake. The United States to borrow a further 1.7 trillion in the next 2 quarters as the Biden administration fights to lift the debt ceiling. Sir, for our viewers who don't understand the debt ceiling, explain to us in 2-3 lines what exactly is this debt ceiling. It's an artificial number. In US has incurred huge deficits over the last 30 years since Reagan. It was called Reaganomics when started. Just 2 lines on that, and then the implication of this, sir.
So very simple. If you have an overdraft limit, let's say of $5,000, your overdraft limit is $5,000. Suddenly you get a bill for $6,000 because you have not received some incoming payment, which resets the balance back to $5,000. So all those payments which crossed $5,000 will be rejected because your limit is $5,000. It's not that you need to immediately increase, but you need to increase the limit so that you have sufficient cushion to make the obligations and manage your cash flow. In simple terms, she is fighting that. So that is Janet Yellen's Treasury is fighting because they don't see enough incoming credits to stay within the $31.4 trillion. So they have to prioritize their payments so that they can manage within. But even otherwise, they are looking at the cash flows and saying, we got to increase the limit to 32 trillion, or at least by another 500 to 600 billion dollars, so that we can manage this. And we are not going to borrow more, but we are going to manage within, but we have a cash flow issue, so the debt ceiling has to be lifted.
So the next the next item that we're going to talk about is about the priorities. Now that there is a House being controlled by Republicans, they are going to push back on the clean energy initiatives. And the Biden administration, despite having all their majorities, they couldn't push through some of the green energy initiatives. What do you see on this particular thing, sir? Is the Republican leadership in the Congress fighting Biden on this one? Or are they going to take bigger issues such as the Hunter Biden scandal and some of the other things? Even, for example, Ilhan Omar, whether they're going to go back and pick up that investigation. By the way, we're going to talk about Ilhan Omar right after this. Please go ahead, sir.
Well, I think what's going to happen is there are different committees which focuses on different issues. So therefore, I think it's not one or the other. For example, we were one of the first people to flag and subsequently that propped up. Remember the so-called inflation reduction budget, which had close to $850 billion of subsidies and expenses earmarked for clean energy. And we said that is just a bunkum that's just going to not be able to, is going to be absorbed. And within 2 weeks, the budget office came back and said, no, there's not enough amount of taxes to offset it. So this is what they're fighting. They're saying this whole subsidies that you are giving is not going to realize outcomes that you are targeting out of this. It is just a program to drain the resources towards these various, industries that you want to. Remember Solenza, Obama's time, and what happened, the amount of write-offs that took place. So I think this clean energy is going to be a battle. They're going to pull back. If it is already converted and signed as a budget, it's down the drain. But let's see how the Republicans fight that street.
And now to our favorite topic, Miss Ilhan Omar. She is fighting hard, tooth and nail, on the news that she is going to be expelled from the Foreign Relations Committee. Why is this post so important, Sridharji?
Very, very important. Any of the committee memberships, Intelligence Committee is important, Foreign Relations Committee is important, National Security Committee is important, the Homeland and the Health Services Committee. The reasons are they get a peep, they get access to documents, they get to look at what happens from a policy point of view in the deliberations. So there is no trust either on Adam Schiff or there is no trust on Ilhan Omar. So they've really targeted.
Oh, you had Swalwell also, Eric Swalwell too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that Ilhan. So now they have picked up sufficient votes. That's one reason. The second reason is she's the torch bearer of this Freedom Caucus, which is effectively taking United States backwards. Just as the Democrats target Trump and DeSantis, they feel that she could be the dark horse in terms of a presidential candidate coming from that specific wing with a populist kind of an agenda. So with all those factors in mind, Sriji, they are saying that we need to get her out of the Foreign Relations Committee.
Sridharji, she cannot, sir. She is not born in the United States.
Well, I don't know. There is, there may be, lots of things keep changing in the United States, Sriji. So don't be surprised if many
things... You're giving me hope, sir. Sir, you're giving me hope.
I always give you hope, Sriji. I said to you, I always give you hope. Very positive hope in terms of your aspirations, Sriji.
No. I'm perfectly happy being on the outside looking in. Sridharji, let's now take a look at India's budget. A lot of stuff is happening, guys, and I'm going to read out some data, but the most important thing that I saw was that the participatory notes route has been further made easy with foreign banks established in the gift city of Ahmedabad being able to issue the participatory notes from within India. This is a big deal because it will essentially make useless that Hawala route where you take the money, give the money in rupees, take it out in dollars in Dubai, and of course involve the hands of a certain colorful characters and then bring it back in through Mauritius. That loop is going to be cut, at least one way to cut it. Sridharji, in terms of 20,000 foot level, has India made it easier for foreign companies to invest now that the United States is very, very keen? You saw how many people have been visiting India. Now, like you mentioned, the NSA is in United States. So has India made it easy for foreign companies to invest in?
I think it's an evolutionary path that India has taken. So everything is in data. Everything is in numbers. when Modi ji took over in 2014, the foreign direct remittances were somewhere around the $30 billion mark. You have seen in 2022, the foreign direct remittances, which we have covered in DGI, come to about $90 billion. So it's almost tripled in terms of the investments flowing into the country. So number one. Number two, the PLI programs at a manufacturer's level is giving incentive for heavy industry manufacturers to come in and provide impetus to localize the manufacturing. Again, when you take a look at the mobile phones, India is now either the second largest or probably close to being the largest manufacturer of mobile phones. So there's a lot of import tariffs that has been cut as a result of localizing the manufacturing with incentives. Something similar we again covered on low end, like manufacturing bulbs, manufacturing air conditioners. So there's a lot of import substitution that has taken place by way of making it easier for manufacturers to come in. Has it cascaded fully into the system? I don't believe so. It'll take some more time. I don't know. It may take another 10 years, Sriji. I have my own experience in terms of the complexities of doing business in India, but that's we belong to the small industry sector rather than the large scale. So I believe that they've addressed the issue on the G2G side of the business, but I think they are addressing on the B2B side of the business. But it's a long way to go when you come to the SME side of the business or MSME side of the business.
Thank you, sir. And I'm going to ask you a simple question. The last time you filed taxes, did you file the taxes under the new tax regime or the old tax regime?
You are asking me?
Yes, sir.
I never file taxes under any regime, sir, because I don't file taxes in India.
Oh, you don't? Okay, so you get off on that one. Well, what is happening, viewers, is, and we are going to do a deep dive on this when we come up with the next program that Professor RV is going to be the guest. We're going to ask him some really tough questions. He'll say it is out of syllabus, but we are not going to let him go because I have a lot of data now. The way things are coming in, I'm getting a lot of data. But I do want to share the deficit numbers of India's economy because we just dealt with what is happening in the United States. I think you have a right to know what is happening with India. Now, the budget estimates the total expenditure in 2022 and 23 is estimated to be 39.45 lakh crores. 39.45 lakh crores, and the total receipts, that is income into the government, is expected to be around 22 lakh crores. So there's a deficit of 17 lakh crores. To get a perspective of what this number is, when Modi came to power in 2014, it was 53 lakh crores. So now we are seeing a tripling in terms of I've got it wrong. India's debt is now 170 lakh crores. This used to be 53 lakh crores in 2014 when Modi came to power. Again, this is something like the debt ceiling. As long as other countries don't worry about the fact that India is running up a huge sovereign debt, things may be okay. Sridharji, I want your input on these numbers, sir.
So I think you're very smart. You're giving one side of the balance sheet, forgetting the other side of the balance sheet.
Please go ahead, sir. I'm willing to be taught.
You didn't give what was the foreign exchange reserves that India built up at that point of time related to what it is today.
200 billion to 600 billion. Now I tell you the answers.
Exactly. So therefore, you know the answer. So debt without having a reserve for yourself, it's managing the both sides of the balance sheet, whether you have sufficient capital to meet your contingency commitments and balances without necessitating for increasing it. Do you know what the foreign exchange reserves of United States is? 250 billion. 250
billion. India. Right.
On a 22 trillion economy. So I think that India has got it right. Okay, so therefore they're saying that 5% or 5.9% of the GDP will be the deficit. They will try to reduce it to 4.5% of the GDP. Mind you, this is also on the back of a COVID program, which requires significant amount of social capital investment to happen in India. So, I mean, as a banker, I don't worry about the either side of the balance sheet as long as you have right cash flows in terms of managing the overall balance sheet of your economy, Sriji. That's my answer.
So the 17 lakh crores will not be offsetted by lower crude prices. It will need something beyond that. So I think let us not worry about that. Like you said, Sridharji, it is now universally accepted. That means inside the world, it is accepted that India is going to be the fastest growing country in this following year. So let's hope and pray that things keep moving in the right direction and that it does live up to its potential. So a lot of things in terms of personal income tax, there are some very interesting numbers. Since Sridharji said he doesn't pay personal income tax, I'm not going to touch upon that in this episode, but in the next one, I will touch upon that. Do join us again. It's a different link, unfortunately, because we have to keep these things separate. Please do join us for Professor RV's discussion, dissection of the budget. Thank you very much, Sridharji. Namaskar. We'll be back again on Friday.
Namaskar, thank you. So let me give you just my 2 minutes to take my final observations, Sriji, and then you have two what you call as the domestic laureates to provide impetus. So macro level, I think that India has got it right. If you carefully look at domestic consumption is the driving force behind the economic growth and GDP, recognizing there are headwinds on the export sector. Export very much contributed in the previous FY 21-22, 22-23 year. I think they have done the right thing on three sectors. Three aspects. One is around the focus around this tax issue, which gives cash, also reducing the corporate tax, incentives and credit guarantees being provided to the industry, capital expansion, particularly around the major segments of the economy, sustenance of the PLI programs, and continued focus, very important. They've recognized food as an important national asset and security, subsidies being given. So to me, I mean, I don't look at India at a micro level, but at a macro level, when you look at the fundamental parameters, I think they seem to be on the right direction. And they've also sustained this big social program of feeding 800 million people with free food grains for one more year. Maybe one can call it populist.
80 crores. I mean, I'll be curious to know how they are going to wean those 800 crore people off of this scheme. That will be a debate for another day, maybe 800th episode of DGI. Thank you so much, Sridharji, and viewers. Please don't forget to reconnect in just a 30 minutes, in about 25-30 minutes time, when we dissect this thing in terms of numbers with Professor R. Vaidyanathan, himself a professor of finance at IIM. Namaskar, sir.
Namaskar. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.